Well, hi everyone, Ron Valent here. Hope you're doing well. And here we are at the very end of 2024 and looking into the very beginning of 2025. Even to say 2024, even though we've lived through the whole years, man, we're certainly far along when it comes to time, aren't we? 2025 is right upon us now. Well, looking back at 2024, we can see that it's been really a breather year for a lot of us in Western civilization, actually all around the world, except for maybe Ukraine and Palestine and now Syria. But given what has happened in the previous 3 years, 2024 was quite the breather. But even though we've had a little bit of a reprieve, the whole agenda has been going forward in the background as this channel has documented some of that. Um, and it's important to keep the big picture in mind. So when these little things that come about, not even little things, but, wars and major events, they're little in comparison to the whole big scheme of things and what's really going on and where we are being pushed to as an entire world, actually. And if you have that big picture in mind, then you can connect the dots and see how things fit. And so, what is a big picture? As you all know, it's to the establishment of a new world order system of government that will control the entire inhabitants of the world. And this is going forward. But, how is it that this is actually being so well coordinated behind the scenes? A lot of times when you talk to people, they say it's impossible. These are all just random incidences and events that are happening. And it's unfathomable to think that all these people around the world are all coordinated. They all know what's going on and they're all having this evil agenda. But it doesn't work like that. A lot of people just go along to get along because they want to keep paying their mortgage and they don't want to risk losing their retirement. So a lot of people just play the game. So from the top, it's coming down, and all these people just go along, politicians and people in high positions all over the world, they go along to get along. So where is this all coming from? And we have, we talk about the World Economic Forum and the UN, but really they're just like front organizations. And there's a power behind that. We'll talk about it in a bit here. But even behind that power, there's still another power. And as you know, I'm a Christian guy. I never was before. When I was younger, I was very antagonistic, quite frankly. But there's been just so many circumstances and events that happened as a young man that I knew that it was beyond coincidence. And I knew that God was trying to get my attention. And finally, I did give the full-on 100% commitment to go that direction. So I know what it's like to be very antagonistic to that type of thinking. But that's how I approach it, and I've spent decades, looking into what's happening in the world, contrasting it to Bible theology, and seeing how all these things play out. And I think that one passage here, Ephesians 6:12, really nails what's going on behind the scenes. And it says here, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of darkness of the world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." So what's being done in this world is actually being coordinated by fallen spiritual entities that are coordinating the world to bring us to this point of total enslavement. And the whole purpose of that is a religious one. So I encourage everyone to have a Christian experience, because what we're going through and will face is biblical in nature. It's about who you will worship finally in the end. Are you going to worship yourself? Or are you going to worship God or some other thing? So that's a perspective that I look at world events through, is through this biblical lens. And I just don't blindly follow an idea or a thought or a theology. It's always being contrasted with what's going on, and truth ultimately will stand on its own. It doesn't have to be propped up, and it can be challenged. So everything that I have established over the years and decades, is up for grabs. It can all be challenged, and I'm open to that as something to consider. So anyhow, looking forward into 2025, we have some a whole multitude of things that can actually really happen. 2025 could be mild all the way to manic, and so dramatic that it'll make our heads spin. Now, one thing is not to borrow tomorrow's trouble for today, but it is good to have an idea, a sense of what we might be able to expect. So when it does happen, we're not unprepared for it. So what are the things that are happening right now? Well, in 2024 and before, and even now, as we go into 2025, there's been a really hard push to the left, even to the point of just being plain out ridiculous. And now what is happening is that you're having this hard push to the right. And you're seeing this in the United States in particular. And we can see it in Oklahoma, where they want to bring back the Ten Commandments into the school system and even teach from the Bible. This is a public school system. And there's two viewpoints on this. A lot of Christians are saying, great, this is what we have to do. We have to bring back our country back to God. And they want to do it through this system, through the government. Other people, like myself, I would say, well, that's all great and dandy to be able to do all these things. I'm all in favor of teaching from the Bible and the Ten Commandments, but the thing is, you can't legislate religiosity or Christianity to people. And when you start mixing religion and politics, it becomes a very dangerous mix, as we've seen all throughout the Dark Ages, because if you didn't go along with the program, you were burned at the stake, right? And so this development in the United States, the thing is that people are feeling pressured to be able to go this direction because they see it as the only way that we're going to be able to save the country. And so there's a major push to the right, and I see that in 2025 really gaining steam, because now you've got Trump getting into office here, and there's Project 2025, which he distances himself from. But really, when you go and look at J.D. Vance and a lot of the other people who are involved, they're all totally in favor of it. And one thing that you can know about Trump or any kind of career politician is that you can't believe what they tell you. You have to go by what they do or don't do. As an example, you got Trump. I remember way back when the first time that he was running for office and he was running against Hillary, and Hillary in the debate says it's a good thing that we don't have someone with the temperament of Donald running the country. And then Trump says, yeah, because you would be in jail. Well, everyone cheered that. And what happened? What was the reality of it? When Trump actually did get in and it was inaugurated, one of the first things he did at an event is he had the whole crowd clap for the Clintons. The Clintons were there, and he says, we got the Clintons here, and they've done such marvelous work for our country. One thing he didn't say was, like, they gave away both ends of the Panama Canal to the Chinese, and the intercontinental ballistic missile systems technology to the Chinese, and all these other things under their watch. Anyhow, I'm getting sidetracked, and he says, well, let's give him a great round of applause. And so anyhow, Hillary is not in jail to this day. And it goes to show you that really they're both playing the same side. They're two sides of the same thing. And we can't be deceived by what these politicians say. There's many other examples. One of the things that really kind of threw me with Trump, because typically when people reach that kind of a high status, they're usually placed there. They are positioned and placed. And it's just not just that, some rogue person is kind of coming up through the ranks and he's going to save the day. It's all very staged. Everything's political theater and very controlled. But when Trump was going in his rallies and he was calling out fake news, that really kind of threw me personally, because with that whole apparatus, the news network, the entire nation can be manipulated left or right, and we've seen that in recent years. It's a very important apparatus because Joe Sixpack comes home from work, he's tired, he wants to catch up with what's going on in the world. Click, he watches 10 minutes of the news, and he's informed now. And this is very pivotal. But to go against the whole news network, which is absolutely an important factor of controlling the people, that I thought, that's incredible. I mean, are they willing to go that far? Maybe Trump is actually the real deal. And as time went on, we could see what really transpired as he brought us all into 2020 and his special operation that he championed. From my perspective, the way I see it is that they were willing to go so far and to even almost sacrifice their media operations in order to be able to gain the confidence of the people, so that when Trump says, okay, now we got to go ahead and do this in order to be able to save our nation, everyone just cattle shoots right into it. And that was the end goal for that whole operation that I could see. That was very pivotal. And going into the future, it's going to be somewhat of the same sort of a thing, but I think on a different plane. People will be cattle shooted into another area, and that will have to do with religious issues that are coming up. So, okay, with the career politicians, you can't believe what they say. You have to watch what they do or don't do. And we have this operation, or Project 2025. It's got the papacy is behind it through Opus Dei and various other organizations. And they've picked their 10,000 people that they want to be able to infuse into their system. They're saying, it's interesting, the way it works, because they say that they want to be able to take down the deep state, when really what there's going to be happening is they're going to be absolutely establishing a deeper state. And that's why we have to be very careful. We have to, when we see these things, we have to ask God for wisdom to be able to see through the lies and deception, because it's just thick. And if you just go by your emotions, or if you just focus in on the small little details, you can easily get swayed and deceived. You have to keep the big picture in mind as what's going on, and always factor that in. So this whole issue of the swing to the right is a very serious thing that I think is going to be happening. And most Christians will back it, and they'll say, this is what we have to do. And that's where tremendous deception is. And most of the people who are really far into this, if they hear this message, they will just totally disagree with it, because all these different reasons involved. So that's one key element. There's a whole bunch of different factors, like a multitude of things really, that can kind of converge at the same time here into the perfect storm for the worst case scenario. But we definitely see World War III being fomented. I mean, right now, NATO is essentially at war with Russia. And then you've got the Middle East being blown up and getting ready for alliances and all kinds of war there as well. And Albert Pike, the 33rd degree Freemason back in 1871, his spirit guide told him that there's going to be 3 world wars. And the first 2 basically have happened as predicted. The 3rd world war is to be with Israel and the Muslim community around there in the Middle East. And this is back in the 1800s that this is talked about. Now, I've known this for quite a long time, decades really, but I never really thought that a 3rd world war would really happen, because if there was a 3rd world war, it'd probably involve nuclear weapons, and how far will that go? But now when I see the developments that are happening, we definitely could be taken right to the brink, or even into a 3rd world war that could affect all sorts of things. And ultimately, whether it's a 3rd world war or other things, natural disasters, I expect natural disasters to increase to the point where it's like it's supernatural. It's not just God is actually punishing us in a sense, and we have to turn back to God in order to alleviate what's happening. You've got, and I've expected this for a long time, the financial collapse of the entire system. That's on the verge of happening too, and that could lead us into, if that was to happen, could lead us into an entire reset. They've talked about a reset. Now, when you reset your computer, what do? You power it right down till it's just dead, and then you bring it back up again into its new operating system that's being powered up. And we could see a situation where that could happen. Coupled with that, you might find Klaus Schwab has talked about we pay insufficient attention to the possibility of a comprehensive cyber attack. The cyber attack might be one of the key elements that would bring us into the financial collapse, as an example. So a lot of things could converge at the same time. And ultimately, I think that these things, well, whether they happen in 2025 or not, I can't say for sure. But at some point in time, there's going to be such calamity whereby people are going to say, well, we need an out, and they will give the solution. They will create the problem, and then they will give the solution, and everyone's going to be in such dire straits that if they don't go along with it, they will be out on the streets and they'll be shut out of society. So some other key issues with 2025, when you hear about the globalists and when they talk about things, you hear 2025 being mentioned. It pops up as being a key date. Now, we have enacted UN Agenda 2030, and the World Economic Forum echoes it. And the World Economic Forum says by 2030 you'll own nothing and be happy. So you have to think about, how is it even possible that we would own nothing and be happy? What would have to take place in order for this to happen? And we've put videos on this channel talking about how this could possibly happen. But definitely that is a hard timeline that they have, that they want to be able to achieve these radical goals. And so we're on that hard timeline with them. And then 2025 is getting very close to that. It's, within 5 years. So I expect some fairly substantial radical things to happen in the next few years, or sooner. It could be 2025. I'm not sure. I think it might be helpful for those who don't know a little bit of my perspective of how the grand overall theme of how I'm seeing things and watching for their development. And that would be in Revelation 13 as one element of it. A lot of people talk about this thing, and they talk about how in verse 16 it says, "And he causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, that no man may buy or sell, save he that hath the mark, the name of the beast, or the number of his name." I expect this to happen eventually. Whether it happens in 2025 or not, I can't say. It's hard to predict the future. But definitely this will happen. And we saw that coming very close between 2020 and 2023. You were exiled out of society to some degree if you didn't participate with the programs. I know it's affected me. I was shut out of various different things that I could no longer participate in. And we saw other things go on in Canada, like in Manitoba in particular. I don't know if you remember watching, the Walmarts where they were cellophaned off, and then they said this is essential and this is non-essential. And some of the non-essentials were really essentials. But you couldn't do it. And all on account of this thing that was going on, the government goes and straps all of these really draconian measures down on us. This whole thing of what is essential and non-essential really ties all the way back to Agenda 21 in 1992 that Brian Mulroney, the so-called conservative, signed Canada onto, and that Stephen Harper signed onto as well when he got into power. And this just dovetails right into Agenda 2030 that Stephen Harper, Pierre Poilievre, and the so-called conservatives signed Canada onto. And Justin Trudeau has just been following through with the whole thing. And so everyone's upset with Trudeau, when really it was the Conservatives who signed us onto these agendas. So the CPC, the Conservative Party of Canada, many would call the Communist Party of Canada, because they signed on to essentially a communist manifesto with UN Agenda 2030. And if you think that's outrageous to say that, go look at point 10 of the 17 points of Agenda 2030. It talks about the rich people being poorer and the rich nations being poor, and the poor people being richer and the poor nations being richer. And you wonder why Trudeau is sending all this money overseas. It all has to do with number 10 of UN Agenda 2030 that Pierre Poilievre signed on to. And people think that Pierre Poilievre is going to save the nation. Well, no. They are WEF UN globalists, in their party just as well as all the rest. But I guess I'm getting sidetracked here. Going back to this issue of the overall theme of things, I'd like to go in and look at, and I'm not going to go extensively into this in any way. I'm just going to give you my overview of it. And it's almost like you don't want to do it because everyone's going to have a different viewpoint. When you start talking about religious perspectives, everyone's going to have a different viewpoint. I'm just going to share with you mine. You can factor it in and go from there. Now in Revelation 13, there's two beasts talked about. There's a first beast that comes up out of the sea, and that beast is a composite beast, and it comes from the book of Daniel. There's the lion, the bear, and the leopard. Lion being Babylon, the bear Medo-Persia, and the leopard being Greece. And these are successions of rulership in this world: Babylon, the Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome, and then papal Rome in the Dark Ages, really. But that first beast, when you go and study it through, is a papacy. And then there's a second beast that rises up, and that I see as the United States. And I'll just read about it here. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. So the United States came up, with religious freedom and with their constitution and all these things, very lamb-like, but we can see that the way it exercises its power around the world is very much like a dragon. And the second beast exercises all the power of the first beast before him, and causes the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. Now, when you go and see the papal takeover of the United States, just go look at their Supreme Court. It's Catholic judges mostly. And if you go through and look at the CIA and these various different organizations, you'll see many of the tentacles leading back to the papacy, whether it be through various different organizations like Knights of Malta and whatnot. So the second beast, and he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down out of heaven in the sight of men. Now this fire could be a literal fire that we have yet to see, or some kind of supernatural, spectacular event. Definitely could be that. I see that for sure. And it also could be fire, the charismatic movement that is swept over throughout the United States when you're slain by the Spirit.
Costi Hinn saw it all on stage, right next to his uncle.
Fire! Fire! Choir! Fire!
You've seen some of those on TV. He goes, fire on you, and people just go spinning and flying through the air.
And this is a difficult one. I know a lot of people are involved in that who maybe watch this channel. But I definitely would put that in that realm right there. And we are told to actually test the spirits, whether they are of God. So whenever these things transpire, it's important that you ask God if this is really of you, and that you can know for yourself. And in verse 14, it says, and deceiveth them. Deception is the key issue here. This is one of the main things that we have to watch out for, is deception. And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by the means of those miracles which he hath power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by the sword and did live. And this whole thing of this image of the beast and giving power and homage to the first beast. The first beast ultimately ruled by church and state union. And that's why if you didn't agree with it, they would come after you with their swords and they'd capture you. And if they got a hold of you, if you didn't go along with their program, they would book burn you. And so this is what we're going to see here in the United States, I believe. And that's why having a good look at the United States and what they're doing is very prominent in this passage. Now, if I have this wrong, if this is the wrong interpretation of these passages, I'm certainly open to look at them. I've looked at many different viewpoints on this, but I'm fairly convinced that this is happening, and we can see it actually happening right before our very eyes. Verse 15, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast. This image of the beast, I would say, is the amalgamation of church and state. And we see this forming and developing with Project 2025. If you go and look at that 925-page document that was inspired and consulted with Opus Dei, you will find that what they want to do in order to be able to clear out the deep state, this is what they're telling you, that they have to be able to give the president almost Hitlerian-like powers to consolidate government. If you go and look at what happened in the 30s with Hitler, many different bills were passed in order to consolidate power into his hands. And it always goes down to a pyramidal power structure that they want to have, not decentralized, but very centralized. And this people are going to go for because they say we have to give Trump the ultimate power grab here in order for him to be able to fix this problem. This is one of the reasons why I believe that this whole issue with Trump, with all of the lawsuits and all of the attacks on him, even, the WWE shooting, because I don't really believe that it was a real legitimate attempt, as we saw in the video I made previously. But it's to give him like demigod-like powers, that God is obviously with him. God has saved his life. God is behind him, and he's our man. And that people will just, in a sense, blindly follow what he's saying, even though it is proven in the past that what he says and what he does are not always the same. So major moves I can see being played out there as far as that goes. Whether these other things will all converge, eventually they will, but whether they converge in 2025, I'm not too sure. But another really key aspect of 2025, there's a video in the short section of the YouTube on the channel. It's called 2025. And you want to go and look at that if you haven't seen that. But basically, it's talking about how Alice A. Bailey, who was kind of like the guru spiritual leader for the UN back in the 1950s, she talked about how from the 50s all the way till 2025, great changes will happen upon the earth. But in 2025, we can expect to see the beginning of the externalization of the hierarchy. And this hierarchy, I believe to be what we talked about in Ephesians 6 about the spiritual powers, the rulers of darkness of this world in high places. And these things will start to be manifest and brought out. And really at the end of 2024, with all these UFO sightings and whatnot, is kind of like priming the pump, I believe, getting us ready. Now, whether there's going to be an alien invasion type component of this whole thing that can happen, it's possible. But somehow we're going to start to possibly see the externalization of the hierarchy. So major events that way could be happening. It may go into 2026, but according to that quote, it's talking about the beginning of it happening in 2025. Ultimately, and I've mentioned this before, is this issue of I see it all kind of culminating into world calamity of such an unprecedented scale that everyone's just totally freaked out and desperate. And then you're going to have a new age Christ appear. I believe it'll be Lucifer in disguise, really. And he'll say, look, in order for us to be able to save the world from utter destruction. Here's a plan. Here's what we got to do. And one of the key things that'll happen is that individualism will have to go, and we're going to have a collectivism. It's for the common good, as we hear oftentimes. That's the buzzword that we hear. It's for the common good. So if you don't go along, and we saw this actually from 2020, 2023, that if you didn't go along for the sort of the common good, then you're putting everyone at risk, and it's your fault that all of these problems are happening. And this will be the demarcation of who you're really going to be worshiping. And that's really the bottom line, because in verse 15, it talks about all those who would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. And for people to go and come to a point where they're willing to kill you, like the average person on the street, if they're willing to go ahead and kill you because you're not going along with the program, it's because, they're really in jeopardy too. Because if things aren't straightened out, everyone's in trouble, and we're all going to end up perishing. I think it's all going to be that dramatic in order for the whole situation to come to this point. And so who you worship, what you worship, is a key pivotal point. And in my books, it's really it's going to come down to those who truly worship God and have a saving born-again relationship, and those who don't. So that's why I say this whole thing is biblical in nature. The end game, the end point is, are you going to go ahead and worship God, or are you going to worship Lucifer, who is going to be acting and pretending to be Jesus on the earth? And it's important to know some of these passages that talk about the second coming, because in the second coming, Jesus doesn't touch the earth. And then in Matthew 24, Jesus himself warns that if someone says that he is Jesus and he's in the desert or he's in the secret chambers, believe it not. Don't even go and look at it. And this deception will be so total, so thorough, so comprehensive that you won't be able to believe your senses. Even now, we can't believe what we see. We got AI impersonating all kinds of things. You got Photoshop. You can't believe a picture anymore, or a movie as actually being real. So you won't even, it'll go beyond that. You won't be able to trust your senses. And if it plays out like I'm thinking it might, it could actually even be that you get telepathically communicated to by the spiritual entity. Now, whether that's going to happen through the 5G network and all of the metals that have been put into our bodies by one way or another, and we become receivers and antennas, and we start to hear these messages, we're going to have to even question that. So it's going to be very dramatic once we come to that point. So we'll have to wait and see if that's going to happen in 2025. One of the things is, don't freak out about it. You can have these things as a possibility, but live your life the best you can, prepare as the best you can, control the things that you can control. These things, a lot of these things we can't control. Some of us, we've ran in politics to try and change things. So to try and change it on that level, but ultimately in the end, this is a huge, big apparatus that's going on. And so just work with what you can work with, and try and make your life the best you can, and make sure that you're in the right position to face these things that are coming down. And ultimately, God's in control. God is allowing things to transpire to go to their full end fulfillment so that everything can be revealed. We saw a great revealing happen in 2020 to 2023. People that you thought were on one side of things are then on another. And it was quite the shock, quite frankly. And as we go forward into this other scenario with the whole issue of climate change and the climate emergency and the whole issue of CO2 being the problem, we're going to see another great reveal of what people are thinking and what side of the fence. And a lot of it will have to do because people have been deceived. So one of the things that you want to be careful of is the television set and the programming that comes through it. That's why I got rid of the TV way back in 1985. Okay, so that's on that aspect here. Getting and talking about Canada here as an example. There's a talk here with Jagmeet saying that he's going to go ahead and have a non-confidence vote, and we could see an election, and everything's poised for the Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives to take power. But when you really look underneath the hood, you realize that they're just the other tag team, the Liberal, Conservative, UN globalist tag team in order to bring Canada into this new world order. And you look at the other parties, they're all globalist as well, the NDP for sure, the Greens, and even the Bloc. When you go and look at some of the things the Bloc is doing, they're UN globalist as well, under the guise of being, a protest vote party in Quebec. So what can we do? I mean, from my perspective, when I ran in 2019 and 21, that the only hope for Canada, or I would say glimmer of hope, is even if you got a PPC majority, then you're still going to have to face all kinds of huge hurdles. So a PPC majority was the only thing I could see that would actually stem the tide of what we're being attacked under. And there's people who don't trust Bernier, and I get that. In the West here, he's French. They don't like him because he's from Quebec, and I get it. Because of what has transpired with Pierre Trudeau and forcing their agenda on us over here. And other people say, well, he's part of the Privy Council, he's sworn in allegiance, and he can't be trusted. I get it. I mean, I almost got into fistfights in 2019 with people being so upset with me coming as a PPC representative on account of that. So I know all about it. And I can understand people's viewpoint on it, and I get it. The thing is that the PPC ran people like myself, Mark Friesen, and many others who were really, were just average guys standing up and saying, hey, we see this corruption and we want to fight it. So when you get a whole body of people in the government like that, then you can start to do things. Okay, so as it stands right now, it looks like the Conservatives will be in power and Pierre's going to axe the tax, right? But he'll probably just do the same thing that Jason Kenney did here in Alberta. Jason Kenney, when he was running, it was a UCP trying to gain power, and he says, it's not fair for hardworking Albertans to be paying a carbon tax. And everyone's cheering and high-fiving. And while they're doing that, he says, but we're going to go after the heavy emitters. So what does that really mean? And it just flew over everyone's head. We're going to have to go after the heavy emitters. So now we're going to have to take tax dollars to create some kind of eco-Stasi police force to go in and monitor Syncrude and all of these other different places of their CO2 output. So it's all based on the same fundamental flawed concept that man-made CO2 is what's causing all of these problems. And so when you get these eco-Stasi police forces gaining strength and getting established and rooted, it's just like another government agency that it becomes its own monster. But when it comes down to the real crux of the matter, that we have to go after the individual person, they're going to have that apparatus in place to start going after us. And I fully expect this is what we could probably expect with Pierre Poilievre and the way he's going to be playing it. So it'll be a backdoor carbon tax on all of us with a Stasi police force behind it. Okay, now as far as the PPC, one thing that I've mentioned a couple things actually to the PPC organization. Maxime Bernier's from Quebec. He should be able to win Quebec. And I suggested that what they should do over there, the issue of the supply management. And for those who don't know, supply management is that there's dairy farms and things to do with in the poultry industry as well. That we'll talk about dairy farms. That you get a contract to be able to supply the milk. And if you don't have that contract, if you're an independent farmer, you can't supply milk into the system. and it's kind of a guaranteed way that these people can get a good price for their milk, and it's kind of a communist type system. It's a cartel, I guess you'd call it. And that issue, even though I am in agreement with it as far as from Maxime Bernier's perspective, because I had that opinion before the PPC even existed, is that subject should be dropped completely. The PPC should go and publicly state that the supply management is no longer an issue that the PPC will forward now or into the future. It's completely off the table. Because I know Quebecers who would have voted for the PPC, and they didn't on account of they want to protect their dairy industry over there. And if you go ahead and do that, that's a very fundamental point. And then what also has to happen is Quebec has been very fiercely defending its French heritage and future, really, right? Even to the point, like with Pierre Trudeau, they went ahead and they forced French on the rest of the country, having French on the back of every parcel and package and cereal and everything else, and people got turned off with that. You're shoving it down our throats, and people who are bilingual, they were the ones who were able to rise high in the government and in the military as well. I know people, fighter pilot as an example, they were very upset with what happened there because they were not bilingual and they didn't get their promotions on account of that. Anyhow, so if Quebec wants to protect its sovereignty as far as being a French province, they're going to have to do better than vote for the Bloc, because all the Bloc is just a protest vote. It's like giving the middle finger to the rest of Canada vote. That's all it really is. And when you start to look at the Bloc itself and some of the things that they do, you realize that they're just another globalist party as well. And they're going to sell out Quebec, and when it comes down to the mass migration, this is one of the elements that's going to actually cause great harm to Quebec and to their idea of a French Quebec. So the only way that they can really protect themselves as a province in what they want to do is to vote, full on with the PPC, because the PPC, if you go and look at all of their various different standpoints, that they're the ones who would be protecting the situation on that level. So unless the PPC can get a majority government, it's done. There will be no backing out of where we're going here. And even if a PPC government was installed, there's so many different ways that they can actually attack the country that it almost seems daunting to even try to win the vote in order to be able to save the country. There's currency issues that they could bring in. You go and look at Omar Gaddafi in Libya. I mean, Stephen Harper and the Conservatives, they flew our fighter jets over there to go and blow up that place. Omar Gaddafi, what he wanted to do, and he had gold and silver laid astore, they wanted to be able to have their own currency. They were going up against the banking system. And that's why, you've got Canada going and sending its fighter jets over there with other places to go and blow that place up. And now it's just, it's a hellhole compared to what it used to be. So, anyhow, with this issue with Jagmeet talking about how he's going to do a non-confidence vote and all these things, and we might have an election coming up fairly soon in Canada, I personally don't see it. You got the NDP, they're broke, they're heavily in debt, just like they've helped destroy Canada with debt. They did to their own party, and because they're just another part of the globalist tag team, to leave Trudeau in until the full duration of time, until November of 2025, I see that would be the way they would do it. A lot of this stuff that's going on in the world is just political theater. Even big moves, like when we're talking about this whole invasion of Russia into Ukraine, to me, that's just political theater. It's real war going on for sure, but it's all been orchestrated. It's all part of a grand plan. It's not just happenstance and coincidence and different things along those lines. It's all well orchestrated, planned, plotted out in order to be able to bring the world to a certain focal point for their end time goal agenda of being able to set up their new world order in totality, and that we're all going to be within this new prison grid, right? So be careful with that. Be careful of deception is the biggest thing. Deception is the key issue, and the best way not to be deceived is to start to grow and establish a relationship with God. And I know it's not easy. But you have to step out somehow and just start, communicating and keeping an eye open and listening to the still small voice that speaks. This is how one of the way God speaks to us. He speaks to us through the Bible and through nature and through various different events and circumstances that we go through. But he also speaks to us with a still small voice. And that's like speaking. It's almost like your own thought. It's when you have this thought that you should maybe do something, and then you end up, no, and you kind of say, I shouldn't do that. Like something as simple as maybe I should take the rain jacket with me on my walk. And you go, oh no, you look at, no, it's perfectly clear, and you poo-poo that idea, and then later on you find out, maybe I should have brought that rain jacket because I got totally soaked on the way. And so it's tuning into that still small voice, and it takes years and years, and even at then, you can still get it wrong because it's almost like your own thought, and it's easy to kind of discard it because you discard your thoughts as you say, you should do this or that. But as you go and if you step into that and you start testing it and you begin to see, oh, that is something I should have really listened to, and start to educate yourself on that whole process. Okay, well, so we'll see what happens. 2025, it's all right before us now. We step into it and try and have a cheery heart as best you can. Enjoy life, smell the roses as best you can. Get out in nature, away from all of the technology. Let the birds speak to you, and God speak to your conscience or your mind. And then you'll have better clarity to be able to deal with the deception and the cons that are going to be coming our way. All right, well, best to you for 2025. Bye.